by bringing on a professor from Virginia Tech University. Dr. Yannis Stivachtis joins us now to talk a little bit more about the constant updates, really, the constant new headlines regarding the war in Iran, specifically the blockade implemented by the United States. Dr. Stivachtis, first of all, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. You and I have not had the chance to meet yet. I'm Connor, and we really appreciate your time here this morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Absolutely, anytime. And, we'll start with that blockade. I want to start very broad here. That implemented within 36 hours, according to reports, that blockade fully in place now on ports coming in and out of Iran. I'm wondering, what was your first reaction when you kind of heard of this latest sort of quote unquote chess move by the United States?
First of all, this idea is not new. Has been around for many, many years. And there were certain reasons for which it was very difficult to implement. And it's still very difficult because there are not so many battleships and carriers around in order to be able to enforce it very effectively. Another thing is that President Trump told us that part of the American Navy is going to clean the Strait of Hormuz from mines. Well, if we can do that, then why we have to have the blockade? If we have our ships very close, then we go back to the original position that the reasons that the American Navy is not very close is because we are afraid of the ballistic missiles coming from Iran. Then what we are going to do, if there are certain ships coming or associated with countries like China, what will be the implications? But if the Straits of Hormuz are closed by Iran, and there is a blockade by the United States, then we reinforce the problem we have for the global economy because there will be no enough oil. Oil coming from Iran because you blockade, or oil coming from the Gulf states because Iran closes the Straits of Hormuz. We should not forget that the reason we allow Iran to continue putting oil on the market, and as well as allow Russia to do it, is not to affect the global economy. Now we reinforce this problem. So yes, there's a pressure on Iran, but also it's an additional pressure on the global economy. And since the economies are interdependent, very soon this effect on global economy will hit back the United States. Probably because of our location on the world map, we may not be affected so much, but will be affected nevertheless, more than we are today.
I want to start with kind of one of the first things you said, which is how difficult it is to actually enact a successful blockade, the resources necessary. I'm wondering, are there any examples in recent history of a successful blockade that has worked to the implementing country's benefit?
Yeah. This is a very, very good question. First of all, we speak about ceasefire, but the notion of blockade, legally speaking, is an act of war. So in other words, the war continues. There is no ceasefire because of the blockade. This is the reason that President Kennedy used the term guaranteeing as far as the Cuba case is concerned. But Cuba was very close to homeland, and we had many more resources available to us to deal with the issue. Now we are in the other part of the world, and it's very difficult and takes time to move these resources there. The issue, however, is whether this is something that is temporary, that would allow the United States president to wait for the arrival of more forces or special forces in order to be able to deal with the nuclear material. So this may be part of a strategy, but not is the main strategy.
Okay, and as we've seen, oftentimes throughout this war, there are moves being made where it can be confusing as to what the objective is. When you read into it, it seems like the blockade kind of fits into that. I'm wondering, everybody, the main focus, and rightfully so, has been on oil prices in terms of economic impacts. We've seen how it's impacted the economy as a whole and tangible effects on the pocketbooks of Americans. I'm wondering, are there other industries that could take a large hit from this blockade that maybe weren't as impacted by the stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz? Does this blockade reach other industries in a way that could have major impacts on the global economy or even specific nations?
All the industries, from microplastics to agriculture. It's not only, we speak about fertilizers. A great degree, part of the world trade on fertilizers coming through the Straits of Hormuz. Oil is used almost everywhere, from transportation to microplastics. So certainly there will be an impact on everything. It's an energy crisis of a kind that we have not encountered before.
And speaking of those naval resources specifically, we have a ship here, the USS Ford, that we saw spend an extended period of time out at sea between the Caribbean and the situation in Venezuela and then on to the Middle East. And eventually that vessel had to go into port to try and fix a couple of issues that they were dealing with, or at least to have some maintenance done. I'm wondering, is there a time limit on how long we can sustain something like this? Or is there an expected time limit, at least, on how long our resources could actually enact this blockade?
It's not only the aircraft carrier. The other ships have also to be maintained, probably get new ammunition. But for the USS carrier, the problem is not the structure of the carrier itself, but also the personnel, because have been there for almost 10 or more than 11 months. And this is very, very difficult. The morale start waning. It's very, very difficult to be on a sea for a very long time.
And negotiations are obviously ongoing. There is this 2-week ceasefire that is kind of holding fragilely. Do you see this as perhaps something that could be simply a measure to gain an advantage in those negotiations that have not yet been able to reach any sort of conclusion that works for both countries? Is it possible that this blockade was implemented to help in those negotiations? And in your opinion, would it actually functionally help in trying to gain an upper hand in those negotiations?
First of all, I don't know what we have to negotiate for. Before the war began, the Omani foreign minister, who was the mediator between the United States and Iran, came out and told us that a very good agreement, the best agreement that ever the United States could have, was on the table. And this agreement included access by the International Atomic Energy to the enriched uranium, the participation of US experts in that team. So what was there and what is to be negotiated, since Iran has been willing from the very beginning, even before the war, to provide access to this material. The two other political goals were the regime change, which has not been achieved, and the second political goal was to get rid of the ballistic missiles. Neither the first nor the second of those goals have been achieved so far. So the only touchable goal that can be achieved in order not to appear going to war for no reason at all, is to gain access to the enriched nuclear material. And that's probably, if there will be an operation by the US Special Forces, is to get this. Because otherwise, since Iran was willing to do it, then what is to be negotiated for the United States? On the other hand, The reason that we have this blockade is if we reach an agreement allows the United States, especially personally President Trump, to claim that this is because of the pressure that he put that allowed the United States to get a good negotiated result.
And
of course, on the side of Iran, Iran doesn't care so much how the American president will sell the issue to the American citizens. What Iran wants is to stop the war, if possible, to get rid of the sanctions and find a way to get money for the reconstruction of Iran. They are not interested in controlling the uranium 100%, the enriched uranium. Of course, they want to have the right, as every other state in the world, to go to 3% uranium enriched. But beyond that, that's fine for them. And of course, nobody is going to say to get rid of the ballistic missiles, because there is no such a thing in the world ever that will allow a country not to do that. Now, I invite you to do something, to think about something else. Remember, we speak about North Korea and all the fears we have in North Korea. And North Korea has nuclear missiles, nuclear weapons and missiles. But now we don't speak about North Korea. So many things we speak about, many scenarios, and make people afraid. But, these are all scenarios. And if we are not careful, and we don't manage the situation, this scenario may take place, and we don't like that.
Yeah, absolutely not. That's Dr. Stivachtis there. My last question for you before we let you go. When we talk about the impacts of the war itself, the Strait of Hormuz, and now this blockade, we don't talk about just impact. We keep saying global economy. It's not like we're talking only domestic economy. This has wide-reaching impacts around the world, which includes, of course, our allies. I'm wondering if you can give some insight into how our allies may react to this blockade, which could ostensibly have trickle-down effects on their own economies. We are already seeing energy crises in Europe that we've had some reporting on here. So what do we expect from our allies in regards to this move that we've implemented?
Well, we already know that some important European allies are very, very skeptical about this blockade. Japan also is very skeptical about what the impact will be on the Japanese economy. We also have heard that China may move in blocking the Straits of Malacca, which are important international straits for international trade. So we are in a very difficult situation. The problem is, if we arrive to a settlement, how this settlement will be presented to the American public. President Trump told us that the basic points that will be discussed are the 10 points that Iran put forward, not the 15 points that he put forward. Meanwhile, we got different information coming out from Islamabad. So we are not sure what is discussed or not, or it's just taking time for a future military operation. Or the United States tries to find a way to come out of a negotiation that can be presented to the American public. Meanwhile, the allies are not very happy with the situation. The European economies have been weakened because of the crisis in Ukraine, and have been further weakened because of what happens with the war in the Gulf region.
Yeah, Dr. Stivachtis, I feel like I could ask you questions all day. That conflict of information has been a theme that we have seen as well throughout this war. I'm glad you brought attention to that in this situation. Yeah, we really appreciate you joining us this morning. I hope that we get to talk again soon here. So, but we'll let you go for today. Thanks for giving us a little bit of your time on this Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you very much for your invitation. I'm at your disposal anytime you like.
Fantastic,
Have a great
Dr.
day.
That sounds great. Sounds great. I'm sure we'll take advantage of that. Dr. Yannis Stivachtis from Virginia Tech University giving us a little bit more insight into that blockade that has now officially been implemented according to reports that we have gotten, the impacts that that could have.